first thing is, what was your relationship with Pelle?
I first met Pelle Lindbergh in September 1981.
Okay.
And I want to make sure I get the dates, somewhere in that ballpark. I was a senior in high school, and I was the stick boy for the Maine Mariners, which was back then, if you remember, was the Flyers farm team.
Right.
And a little background on me: I started working for the Flyers organization in 1977, while I was in high school.
Wow.
And my senior year, Pelle came to camp with Thomas Erickson as draft picks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I met him. And it was right after the 1980 Olympics.
Right.
Do you remember that he played for Team Sweden?
Right, and he was the only person that USA couldn't beat.
Tied 2-2.
2-2, yeah.
Absolutely appalled. They were absolutely appalled, both he and Thomas Erickson, that they didn't beat the U.S. that first game.
Was it 27 seconds left or something like that?
Yeah, and it was 2-2 a tie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They had them.
Yeah. So to get back to your original question, that I got to know Pelle because he was here in Portland, and at the time, let's see, he was born in '59. He was 21, and I was 17.
Right.
And he's a kid. He's a kid at heart.
Right.
And he was a kid then.
That's what Telty said too.
Yeah, and he really was. And he and I we just started hanging out, and he was the kind of guy that he gravitated towards the average Joe.
Right.
The big stardom stuff didn't do anything for him. He hung out with the average Joes, and even me being in high school, I didn't go to the bars with him, or go out to nightclubs.
Right.
But I was at his house hanging out, building model planes and flying them, in parking lot. I remember flying a plane with him that we helped build, one of the little not electric, but gas-powered planes. And up here in Maine, it was about 15 degrees, and it went up in the air and crashed. We were at the Maine Mall. But that was Pelle. He says, "Okay, we're going to fly this plane." We kept having to put it inside a car to warm it up,
right,
and then get it started, and the thing went up and crashed, and it was in a million pieces.
Oh man!
But that was Pelle. That was Pelle in a nutshell back then. Out of high school, I went to work for the Flyers full time, and Pelle was with us for the first. Well, was he? That year that I was in '81, he was with the Mariners, and we went to the finals against the Adirondack Red Wings, Droid's team. Lost in the finals. The next season, Pelle went up, and he was with the Flyers pretty much from then on. But I kept in touch with him, and he, even though he was in Philadelphia, he'd call and say, "Hey, how's things going? What's new?" And at the end of the season, I went over to Sweden. I went to Sweden I've been there about 12 times now, but
wow.
4 seasons I spent, after 4 seasons, I spent like 6 weeks at a time in Sweden hanging out with Pelle and all his buddies.
Right.
So,
now, you had mentioned that the day he bought his Porsche,
yeah,
you were there.
Yeah.
You drove his Saab back to his mother's house?
Yeah, it was his dad's. Well, it was his. The Saab that we were in originally, it was his. He gave it to his dad, and we drove that car to this place. It was a dealership called VAG Stockholm, and we picked that Porsche 911 Turbo up, and I drove the Saab back to his mom's apartment,
right,
where he was living at the time. And that car was it was an amazing car. He was very proud of it, and actually that car later on, I'm thinking 1984, he had it here,
right,
and put it in the woods, and the back burned up on it,
right,
in Marlton.
The leaves, right? There were leaves underneath?
Yeah, because it was so hot. The engine was hot.
Right.
But anyway, the back of it caught on fire. It wasn't a bad fire. It was just some minor damage. He ended up taking that car back to sending it back to Germany, and they put a new engine in it and more power, slope nose the front, put louvers in it, and he brought it back over.
What was his infatuation with speed? Was it just something that...
He liked fast boats, fast cars, fast living. That's what Pelle Lindbergh liked.
Yeah.
That was him. Speed, adrenaline. Look at him as a goalie. I mean, he was just amazing.
He was.
Oh yeah.
And what Santi told me, which was amazing, was that he didn't have much flexibility.
He didn't. He couldn't. He was the kind of guy that he couldn't touch his toes.
Wow.
And he said to me one time, we were talking about being, he was a goalie in the NHL and all this stuff, and I, you have to understand that from 14 until my mid-20s, I was involved daily with professional hockey. So after a while, it becomes a routine.
Right.
And people stop impressing you just because they play, they play in the NHL. And he and I were talking about the ability to play as a goalie in the NHL, and he told me, he said, this is easy. You could do it. And I don't think he caught on how good he was.
Really?
I really don't. And he was sincere. He says, this isn't that hard. He says, you can do this. He says, if you put your mind, you can do what I'm doing. This isn't hard. This is
wow.
easy. And he was being genuine. He wasn't being gratuitous. He was serious.
That's amazing.
Now in his mind, me, we could step in and play goal in the NHL. Hard to believe.
Yeah, very hard to believe.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen me play goal, you would.
Well, I've never played goal. I'll play. I play, but I don't play goal. But that was what he thought. But, so.
Wow. But what was his life like in Sweden? That you know.
Yeah. Well, in what way?
Well, growing up, did he ever talk about his childhood or?
Yeah. I mean, I've met his entire family and had had dinners and lived over there with them. He had two older sisters. One died of cancer. Her name was
Anna Christine.
Anna Christine died of cancer in probably 1989 or 88. And Louise as a daughter, and a daughter.
Right.
And her name's Anna or Anna. And anyway, he was younger than them, and I think he was born later in their in their parents' life.
Right.
Siggy, his father.
Right.
He's passed away.
Did he?
Yeah, and his mother is still alive.
Mm-hmm.
I forget her name.
Oh, you know what? I do too, and I have it. Annalisa.
Annalisa, yeah.
Yeah.
So he was a goalie from 5-6 years old. He played for this in Sweden. You sign on to a team at a young age, and you're brought up on that team. Different divisions, but it's like he played for AIK Stockholm.
Right.
And he played from at a young age. Actually, he started with this team called Hammarby.
Yes.
Yeah. So he played for Hammarby until I think he was late teens, and then he played for AIK Stockholm, and then this team called Solna. But not that good in school. Hated English.
Really?
Yeah, his teacher said you'll never learn English because they start learning English in the second or third grade. So he was the type of student that throw caution to the wind. He doesn't need it because he's going to play pro hockey. This is the way he thought.
Typical kid.
Yeah, and I remember the story about later on, when he was in Philly, he was telling me how he'd like to go back and talk to his English teacher in Sweden and speak English to her now, because he was proficient. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
seen interviews of him and all that stuff. So, he was on the junior national team and the national team, and this is all historical, and you can find this stuff out. But played on the junior national team, and the national team, and then the Olympic team, and he made a movie.
Leave Me Not Alone?
Is that what it's called?
Yeah,
it's horrendous, whatever it was. And
he was on a motorcycle, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. It was a horrendous movie. But when I was over there with him, he's known or was known by everybody.
Really?
I mean, anywhere we went, we could be on the west coast of Sweden. We could be on this huge island called Gotland, and everybody. People would come up to me and say, "Hey, you're with Pelle Lindbergh," and I'd say, "Yeah." And he's just. I mean, to this day, maybe the young kids don't know him, but maybe they've heard of him. But back then, he was a god over there.
Right. Have you seen? There's a website out there. It's a Pelle Lindbergh website. I can't remember the name of the website, the address, but it's a guy. His name is Kenneth, and I can't remember his last. Soljan, I think it is. I don't know if you've ever seen it. He's got about 450 pictures of Pelle.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing. He's got pictures of his parents' house. I mean, if it's true, still, his parents had a shrine really to him. They left a room with all his awards and trophies.
Yeah.
He's got pictures of that on that website.
Been there.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I have pictures. I went back. The last time I was there was in '95, and I was there with a couple of buddies and my wife now, and I have a picture. She's left the room just the way he left it, and
wow.
His Olympic medals there. He's got a ton of medals. Because in Sweden, when you win a championship, it's a medal.
Right.
So, like an Olympic medal, and the place is filled with trophies and medals and things like that. But
that's amazing.
Yeah, that's true.
Did he hang around, like you said, he hung around with, the common people, fans? What was his rapport with fans? I mean, like Ed Parvin, for instance, he was a fan, I guess? The guy who was in the accident with him?
Eddie Parvin was, and his dad was they were sort of hang-arounds. I wanted to belittle them or demean them.
Sure. They were real estate agents, right?
Yeah, they were people that just liked the Flyers and were known to the team.
Okay.
Nice people, don't get me wrong. Very,
sure.
Very nice people.
Sure.
But, yeah, he wasn't someone, Ed Parvin is not somebody that hung out with Pelle, or Pelle would, call up and say, hey, come over to my house and hang out for the day.
Right.
But, he was known to Pelle, and the whole deal with the crash, where they were going and all that stuff. I don't think anybody's quite sure, but.
I know reports that he was driving Ed Parvin home to his house. That was one of the things I remember. In Gene Hart's book, I don't know if you read Score.
No.
He says that they were headed to Ed Parvin. He was going to drop off Ed Parvin in Mount Ephraim, New Jersey, and just drop him off because the night was over. And he was headed back to have breakfast with Craven and Rick Tocchet.
Yeah, that could be. When that happened, I was back in Maine,
mm-hmm.
And here's my story behind that. At the end of the season, 84, 85.
Right.
84. Yeah, 84, 85.
Right.
I left. I came back to Maine, and I was hired as a cop up here.
Okay.
In Portland, and the thing with Pelle always, his advice to me was that in Sweden the cops are idiots and well liked, and I should not do that. I need to stay with the team and be part of the team.
Right.
So the long and short of it, he is killed November 11th, 1985.
Right.
A week before that, I talked to him on the phone, and he had said to me, you need to come back. You belong here with this team, and I want you to come back to the team. And of course I said, well, I'm not going to go back to go back to that. At this point, I'm starting a career. I need a retirement. I need I need to move on because hockey's especially for a trainer. Hockey's a tough road to haul. I mean, it's long hours. It's tough work, and the trainers don't get the glory. The players do.
Right.
Fun thing to do for I've been in that 9 years, but it was time to leave.
Right.
When he was killed, I went back down to Philly in Jersey, and his fiancée Sheshton said that she wanted me to go with them and Pelle's body back to Sweden for the funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And the Flyers actually picked the tab up, and we were all, it was me, Sheshton, Thomas Erickson, his girlfriend at the time, her name was Malin, and somebody else. It was Pelle's uncle, I think, was there at the time when that happened. So
I know his brother-in-law also, like Goran was his name?
Joran.
Yeah.
That's his uncle.
His uncle, okay.
Was his brother-in-law?
I read in the book that it was his brother-in-law, but that,
Yeah, it's uncle or brother-in-law. I can't remember which one it was.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, we flew back on Scandinavian Air with Pelle's body, and I stayed at Sheshton's mother and father's house during that whole thing. And what was interesting was Jay Snyder, Bernie Perrant, and Bob Clark and Keith Allen came over for the funeral, and we were having a gathering at this house in Sweden. And Bob Clark actually came over to me and asked how things were going, and he offered me my position back with the team.
Wow.
As a trainer, and I took him up on the offer, and I ended up going back. And Pelle had an influence on me in that sense, because he had said a week before this whole thing happened, I want you to come back to the team, and it was almost like this is what I should be doing right now. And I went back and was there for the rest of the season.
That would be very difficult, I would guess, for you to be away from the team at that point.
At that point.
Sure.
And this was the toughest thing that I'd ever gone through as a person.
Sure.
Ever. And I mean, the Flyers were great. I mean, they flew me over there for that for the ceremony and offered me my job back, and I did it. So it was sort of to look back on it now, it was tough to turn down.
I'm sure. How did you find out about the accident? Did someone call you from the team?
No. What happened? I worked as a cop. I'd worked the midnight shift, and I was living at home at the time. And my sister woke me up because it was on ESPN. So I called down to the rink in Voorhees, and I talked to E.J. McGuire.
Right.
And because they weren't giving out a lot of information, but E.J. said, hey, we called him Gump. He said,
yeah.
He says Gump's dead. He says he's not going to come out of this. And I got on a plane and flew right down and went to the hospital.
Now, what are your feelings at that point? I mean, just hearing that over the phone, that jolt. I mean, that must have been excruciating.
Yeah, it was surreal. I mean, it was just a feeling that you don't have any control over it, and it's hard. It's just hard to believe until you see for your own eyes that this is finality. And for me, finality was to go into his hospital room and have a minute with him, and look at the monitors. I remember seeing the monitors and and all that stuff, and his leg had been broken and was it was just that for me was finality.
Did he look like Pelle at that point, or?
Oh yeah.
He just looked like he was sleeping.
There was no trauma other than you could tell he had a splinter cast on his left leg.
Right.
Because it was a broken neck.
Is that what it was ultimately?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing is, especially I've been to that area, and it's just amazing how that particular area, anywhere else in New Jersey, you don't see walls like that or a road that turns.
That's like up here. That's like something you'd see up here in New England.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. That would be a common, especially in in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. I mean, they have a lot of roads that do crazy things like that. With
Yeah. Yeah, it's just amazing. You know, I don't know if you saw the letter, because I didn't have your address, but when I wrote to Len Hackborn, you know, I was 10 years old, and, you know, Suddy Settlemeyer asked me yesterday, he said, why do you want to do this? And, you know, I went from 10 years old to about 18 that day because I never dealt with death before.
Yeah.
Here's a hero who, the Saturday night of the accident, I remember going to bed, and the last thing I watched was the news that night, and he was congratulating Bob Froese on a win.
Yeah, they played the Bruins.
Yeah. And to wake up the next morning, I kept asking my father, as a 10-year-old, there's no way, Dad, you really mean he can't, there's no way he could come out of it? You know, and it's still amazing to me how things change that quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that was the thing that struck me.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why I wanted to do this, too. You know.
The thing and I've spoken to groups about this after the fact, where I've done some video. I have that video montage of Pelle. And one of the things that I tell them, and this is what bothers me the most about Pelle's situation. I don't know how many times that we were out in Sweden, and in Sweden, a DWI or OUI, we call them OUIs up here, but driving under the influence.
Right.
First offense is 6 months in jail. Second offense is a year.
Right.
Mandatory in Sweden. And in Sweden, they have roadblocks at 10 o'clock in the morning. You'll be driving on the road, and there'll be a roadblock, and they'll be breath testing people driving down the road.
Wow.
And any time that we were in Sweden or out in Stockholm, and we said, well, you know, hey, let's have a couple, the car was parked, and it was a bus or a cab home. Absolutely, without question, he was not driving.
Right.
But here in the United States, he was allowed to do it. Because here's the problem. Because you're a superstar in this country, at least back then, maybe things haven't changed all that much.
Right.
But here, he got off every time he got in trouble.
Did he get in trouble a lot with driving?
Well, it wasn't so much, and I'm not saying got in trouble. There was a situation up here in Maine where we were at the Civic Center here in Portland, and the police were going to tow Gordy Williams' car. Gordy Williams was a player
right
at the time. He's a draft pick for the Flyers. And Pelle went out and got in the car, and he got in Gordy's car and drove off. And they forced him off the road, and they put him in handcuffs, and they were going to arrest him and all that. But,
wow.
But he was Pelle Lindbergh.
Why did he do that? Why did he jump in the car?
Because that was Pelle. Who knows? He just decided it was time. You know, if we move the car, they're not going to tow it. So he got off, and there was that other situation when his car got burned up. That you know he was Pelle Lindbergh, so
he's not going to be punished for.
Nothing was done.
Yeah.
And you know, I guess my suggestion is that if he was held accountable here, he may have thought twice about drinking and driving. Because let's face it, he was killed because of drinking and driving.
Now, it's funny. You get differing opinions, I guess, because what you're saying, I agree with. What Suddy Settlemeyer said yesterday, he said that he doesn't think the alcohol was the big thing. He thought more that it was just Pelle drove like a maniac. And I tend to think that when you put two and two together, you're doubling the chances for a disaster.
I was a cop for 20 years.
Right.
And I recently retired. But a .28 is few and far between when you're stopping people for drunk driving.
Right.
People show severe impairment at .18.
Wow.
It was .28, and you know, what happens is, you know, he's in that car, and whatever happened in that car, whether she turned the key off or what, I don't know. I don't know what happened. But the bottom line is, when you throw a curveball at someone that's a .28, they have trouble reacting the way they normally would.
Were there rumors that she actually turned off the car?
I've heard that. Now, you know,
because she was scared.
We have to be careful about, you know, writing something that can get, you know, both of us in trouble for
Oh,
it.
absolutely.
You
No,
know
I
what I'm
totally.
saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very careful.
It's got to be
I don't
true, right?
You know, there was a rumor that took place. I have no idea if she did or not.
Right.
But that curve came up quick, and if he's going fast, you know, and he's looking away or he's distracted, you know, and being impaired, he's not going to make that corner.
Right.
So,
were you angry with him at that time? And are you still today? No.
No. I mean, it happened. I mean, no, I'm not angry with him. I think his fiance was angry. She did a thing with what was the art? There was an interview with
American Almanac with Connie Chung and Roger
Chung.
Mudd.
Yeah.
I have that interview.
Yeah. What's interesting at the end, she says, you know, who do you blame for this? And she says, I don't blame anybody but him. And you know, let's call a spade a spade. I mean, who do you blame? You know, in a sense, I blame the system here. If that was Sweden, he wouldn't be drinking and driving.
Okay.
I guarantee you that, because
Right.
I was there in situations where he could have got away with it and he didn't. He didn't try. Here, it was a different story, and we have different mores and different beliefs here, or at least we did back then. I'd like to think that times have changed and that people aren't as inclined to drink and drive, but you also have to understand that in Sweden, you could take a bus from Stockholm to the south of Sweden in Malmo to up to the west coast to Halmstad on a bus or a train.
Wow.
Or cabs are all over the place.
So they have more access to public
You
transportation.
don't have that here.
No.
You know, and gas, even back then, gas was $5 a gallon because they tax the hell out of it, and
Wow.
people don't drive cars as much
Mhm.
because it's too expensive.
Right.
So you have a different, you know, there's a whole different scenario that you have to fall back on. But, you know, we're here. I mean, if you're in Voorhees and you want to get out to Mount Laurel, you gotta take a car. You know.
Well, oh, yeah.
There.
Yeah,
You're not
exactly.
gonna walk. You're not gonna take a bus. So you know that's it's a whole different set of circumstances.
What do you think made him drink that night? I mean, was it just he wanted to have fun, or there were a lot of reports in newspapers that he was depressed that night?
Nah.
You don't think so?
No.
Okay.
Pelle would he'd pick his spots. You know, he was at 22, 23, or 20, I think he was 24. Maybe, was he 24 or 25 going on?
When he passed away?
Yeah, 24?
26.
Okay. He's 26. He'd go months and months without drinking.
Right.
At all.
Right.
I mean, but we'd go out to, like, Los Angeles and would have a 5-day layover, and we'd go out and have a good time. Time went on.
Right.
Summertime, it may be a little bit different. You know, there'd be. I mean, he drank, but he wasn't the type that would drink every day or every night or once a week. It would be he'd go out, and if he's with a bunch of people, the credit card would come out, and it would be, hey, we're gonna have a good time, we're gonna party.
Right.
It's nothing to go out in Stockholm, and by the time the night's over, he's ordered 8 bottles of wine for everybody, and it's just, let's just have a good time because we can.
Right.
But depressed, no. I don't think he was just this happy-go-lucky kid that would he'd blow in 10 minutes before practice, get dressed real quick, and go out and stand on his head, and then go fly model airplanes in the afternoon.
Wow.
That was Pelle. I mean, there's a guy you need to talk to, and his name's Jack Prettyman.
The policeman.
Yeah, he's a deputy chief in Voorhees Township, and Jack was probably the closest person to Pelle down there.
Okay.
Without a doubt. Jack would hang out with us. We'd go to we'd hang out. He'd go with me. We'd go over to Pelle's house. Jack took us shooting all the time at the shooting range.
Right.
And Jack is someone that you should talk to.
Yeah, I've tried to look him up. I think, would he be in his late 50s or early 60s
Yeah.
now? Okay.
I think he's still the deputy chief in Voorhees Township PD.
Still is, okay.
Yeah, I talked to him about a year ago, and he was still there.
Okay, great. Yeah, I definitely will.
Jack Prettyman.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, he's got some insight. I remember Charlie Pope was the cop that did the investigation.
Right.
Right. I mean, I don't know if you're focusing more on the accident in the aftermath, but or the life leading up to it.
Well, actually, all of it.
Yeah.
It's the whole story's intriguing. I mean, the thought of how he wanted to be a flyer because he idolized Marty Perrant.
Yeah, that was interesting. Yeah.
I mean, the fact that he would want to be a flyer and then get drafted by the Flyers. And then the ultimate irony that he reached almost every single goal that he could possibly ever ask for. And then 6 months later, it'd all be gone.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, that's an amazing story.
Well, I believe we're all here for a reason.
How did he change after he won the Vezina Trophy, or did he change at all?
I after the Vezina Trophy, I was back up here, and
Right.
My contact was by phone. I don't think he changed. I don't think the Vezina Trophy, for him, doesn't mean a whole lot. I think the Stanley Cup would mean a lot to him. But the thing is, with Pelle, if he won the Stanley Cup, he'd make sure that Jack Prettyman and his friends were around to see it and revel in it. People that would come over here from Sweden were like trainers from his team in Sweden. This guy named his name was Nolan, but it means the zero in Swedish. And this kid was a trainer. He'd come over all the time and just hang out with Pelle.
Right.
He was really big with keeping in contact with his friends in Sweden.
That's great.
And they're not hockey players and stars. They were kids at the time.
Buddies that he grew up with.
And he'd make sure that he'd call them and send letters. He was big with writing letters to people. It was before email, but he'd write letters all the time to his buddies in Sweden to keep in contact with them.
Wow.
That says a lot.
That does say a lot. He had a sense of loyalty and a sense of friendship.
Yeah. And his best friend, who spent a lot of time over here, I still keep in really close contact with. As a matter of fact, he was here in July. He was here in March and July up here in Portland.
Right.
And he played hockey with Pelle at Harmarby. Went to school with him, and I sent an email off to him today to see if he'd be interested in talking to you, and I'm sure he would, because he's a real, he's really affable, really nice guy.
That'd be great.
I have an email address, and it's his work one. If you want to take it down.
Sure. I didn't even ask you if it's okay. I'm recording the conversation. Is that okay?
Fine.
You sure? Okay. If you just say it, I could.
Okay. It's Bjorn, BJORN.
Right.
Neckman, NECKMAN.
Okay.
At STOPORTS.com.
Great.
Is that .com or .se? It might be. If that doesn't go through, try SE at the end instead of .com.
Okay.
For Sweden. But that's Bjorn, and
he was a childhood friend?
Yeah, and he spent 2 seasons over here with Pelle.
Did he live with him?
Yeah, he just hung
Wow.
out.
It's amazing how many people, that I've gotten a chance to talk to say that Pelle took him in, and
Yeah, he had this guy, Bjorn. He came over. He stayed in Maine for 2 seasons and spent some time down in Philly because Pelle wanted his friends to be over here too.
That's something else I was going to ask you. Did he ever confide in you about his homesickness, especially in the beginning, in the early years?
There was a point where he wanted to go back to Sweden because he was playing in Maine, and he told me, and this was in the press also. I mean, he said, I'm playing in the Olympic team, I'm playing in the national team. I'm playing Swedish elite in Sweden, and I come over here and I'm in the minors. He said, what am I doing here? That's what he'd say to me. Well, why am I here? You know, I want to play in the NHL, and that's where, you know. And but he knew that, you know, and he went up relatively quickly. You know, as he was only here in Maine for about a season and a half before he went up to Philly and started playing in Philly.
He was MVP that year, right?
In Maine?
Yes.
Yeah, and they went. You know, we went to the Calder Cup Finals.
Right.
It was that Adirondack, and they had a hell of a team back then too. That Adirondack team. It was all Detroit players.
Right.
But you know that, you know, and that's why he would say to like Bjorn, "Hey Bjorn, come on over," and because he missed speaking Swedish. He missed you know, the Swedish culture. Back then, when he first came over, his English wasn't that great. But he also had Thomas Eriksson, who was living with him, and you know, those two, although they weren't, you know, Thomas and Pelle weren't best buds.
Really?
They were, you know, they got along. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But they weren't. They were opposites.
Gotcha.
Thomas is the kind of guy that would stay at home and, you know, watch TV or, you know, read. Pelle is like, well, let's go to the movies, let's go out and party, Thomas, that's not Thomas Eriksson.
Right.
And Thomas is now a police officer in Sweden.
Is he still a police officer?
What's that?
I said he still is a police officer.
Yeah. He's in Stockholm, in Sodermalm. Actually, the station he's at is in the same area that Pelle's from, Sodermalm, in Stockholm.
Wow.
I actually was over there when I was over there in '95. I went out and rode around with him in the police car.
Did you?
Yeah.
Do you stay in touch with him at all?
You know, I haven't talked to him in a while, but I did for quite a while. I need to stay in touch. But.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, if you could just pass along, you know, what I'm trying to do. You know, if he'd be interested, you know, I would love to get his insight as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were going to try to reach Cheston?
I sent an email. I found her. I know her last name is Somnol, and she's got a hyphenated last name. I sent an email to her address, and 3 of them bounced back. The 4th one, I think, went through, but I didn't get a response, so I'm not sure if she got it or, you know, Kevin, to be honest with you, it worries me because I don't want to open up old wounds.
Yeah.
At the same time, I don't want to write a book and leave her out of it, if she would want to do that.
Well, you know, I think the thing to do is to talk to Bjorn.
Okay.
Because Bjorn's in touch with everybody over there, and you know, if you can convince him or have him make some inquiries, because he can also do the you know, be the go-between with Annalisa.
Right.
Because she can't speak English, so you're not going to be able to interview her.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Yeah, and what I did is I learned quite a bit of Swedish, and enough so that I could go over and I could speak to her, and his dad couldn't speak English, so I had to speak Swedish with him, and you know, it was kind of nice to be able to go over and immerse myself in that culture and learn the language, and because it's just total immersion.
Right.
And you know, after a while, I was able to, you know, listen to conversations and just I knew what they were talking about, which was, you know, kind of fun.
Yeah, I'm sure. How devastated? I mean, from what I've read, his father never really got over both the loss of Pelle and his sister. Was it just a total disaster at that point?
Yeah, and you know, he got sick too. I think it was Alzheimer's.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he declined quickly.
Right.
And but yeah, I think he was just devastated.
Sure.
By it. And I was fortunate to be able to meet Aunt Christine and go to her house and spend time with her and her kids. It just seems like that family was, you know, they got the best and then they got the worst, and
yeah,
you know, they got the worst really hard.
Yeah, I mean, to lose two kids, I can't imagine what they must have gone through.
Yeah.
You know.
And his mother's a sweetheart.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow, that's great.
likes to cook. You know, when they go there and there's big meals, and you know, just a nice woman.
You know, and my goal at some point is to travel over there. If the family and friends are willing to speak to me, I would love to go over, you know, and talk to them. And, you know, like you said, if Bjorn, if he'd be willing to help me do that, that'd be great.
Bjorn's a really down-to-earth, nice guy, and I'm confident he'll talk to you. There's no doubt in my mind he'll talk to you.
That's great.
And I sent an email, and what I'll do is I'll just forward the response to you. I haven't talked to him in a month or two, but you know we stay in touch.
Right.
And the only reason I know him is because of Pelle.
Right.
You know, he was at my wedding, and I mean there's. Do you remember Reno Sundberg?
Reno Sundberg. The name's
Sundberg had a tryout. He came to camp one year. It's Pelle's really good friend.
Right.
He's a goalie also, and you know he's got a company now that makes goalie masks called Radic, R-E-I-D-I-C.
Right.
I've got. I don't know. I don't know if he's a little more shy and standoffish, where Bjorn, I think, would talk to you like I'm talking to you. You know?
Right.
You know you've got a goal here, and I'd like to help you get to it.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, Reno may not. I don't know. You're gonna find that some people, you know, just don't wanna participate.
Sure. No, I understand that.
I'm sure that's gonna be the case.
Yeah, I didn't expect, you know, everybody to. I'm hoping that most of the players will. I got a call from Joe Patterson.
Nice guy.
Yeah, he gave me a call, left me a message, and I got back to him today. I couldn't catch up with him.
How are you finding the numbers for them?
I don't have the phone numbers, but there's on the website you can find addresses of former players.
Oh yeah, the alumni.
Yeah, and I went in and I found the players, and I just sent them. I sent out 46 letters to start. You know, and I'm hoping Darren Jensen got back to me.
You know, remember he played that first game.
Oh yeah, against Edmonton.
Yeah, I was there for that. I was up in the press box.
How amazing was that game? I mean,
yeah, I mean he had a shutout and he played well. And, he's a good guy.
Yeah, he's a very nice guy. Yeah, it was great to talk to. How did the team go forward after the accident? I mean, it was always said that they were a close-knit team. Did that bring them closer?
Yeah, and that team was pretty much intact from, you know, like 83, 84 through 86. You know, you had the young guys like Tocchet and Peter Zezel. You know, those 20, 21-year-old guys that were really good, and they played like 15, 18 years in the league, and so they were good. I mean, guys were the Sutters, Richie and Ronnie. I mean, they were just so emotional, and you know. But the team came together, but you know that the playoffs came in '86.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Washington. No, it was New York Rangers.
Rangers, yeah.
The Rangers. I mean, it was like you know, swift and complete. I mean, the team. And I don't know what it was that you know that was different from the season before, but you know I think it's just been such an exhausting,
emotionally draining season.
Season that the guys just, you know, to me it was like, you know, let's get this over with,
right,
and move on. But
did they play different in front of Bob Froese than they did with Pelle?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Bob was a pretty good goalie.
Yes.
You know, to me, the teams wouldn't play well in front of a goalie if they didn't have confidence in that goalie. You know, was he going to be there to make the big save? And Froese could do that. Have you talked to him?
I sent him a letter. I haven't heard back from him yet.
Is he with the Rangers?
He actually is a pastor of a church in New York.
So he's not, because last time I talked to him, he was a goalie coach for the Islanders or the Rangers?
I think the Islanders.
It was the Islanders.
Yeah. I'm going to follow up with an email to him because I found his email address. You know, do you think? I mean, you know him. Do you think that he'd be the type of person that'd be willing to talk about it?
Probably.
Really?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
He's a character.
Is he?
Yeah. He's a nut. He's a nut. I don't know if you ever heard stories about him, but he used to, you know, bark at players.
I heard about that.
Yeah. You know, he just do crazy things. He was just one of the fun guys to be around all the time. Always joking around.
How did he get along with Pelle, especially in the beginning?
Pelle was really competitive.
Right.
And I think he viewed Bob Froese as someone that was, stood in his way. I think could be anybody. It could have been me in that position if I was standing in his way. I'm trying to think. They got along. There wasn't like they were bitter words or.
Right.
They got along, but it was, the goalies on any team, it's few and far between are the two goalies best friends. Once in a while you see that, but they're, the competitiveness between who plays and who doesn't, and the decisions made behind who plays and who doesn't, can be a cause for, some issues.
Sure. So they weren't the best of friends. I mean, how did Bob Froese... Now, there are rumors. I don't know if you knew this or not. You probably did. Bob Froese was about to be traded to the Los Angeles Kings the week that Pelle died. And then all of a sudden, things changed dramatically, obviously, on that Sunday. What was it like at the end? I mean, do you think that Bob Froese knew that they were going to part, and it was...
Yeah, remember, I wasn't there.
That's true. Yeah, I forgot about that.
That fall,
yeah.
Was the time when I wasn't with the team. So I you know what? I never heard about a trade.
Don Perry, who used to be I think he was a scout with the LA Kings. He was at that game the Saturday night that Bob Froese played. And what they said, a lot of what the old papers said was that the reason that Bob Froese played that night was to showcase him in an upcoming trade. And the rumor was it was supposed to be Jay Wells that was coming to Philadelphia. Darren Jensen was going to come up and back up Pelle Lindbergh. That's what the paper said.
Yeah, it's very possible.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. I mean,
but I didn't. And to answer your question, I don't know. I never heard that, but I wasn't there.
What was? Did you talk to Pelle during the summer of '85?
I talked to him after the season, a little bit after the season, and then not until. I don't remember. I can't remember. I mean, I had his number in Sweden. I may have talked to him, but it doesn't ring a bell. I mean, it's a long time ago.
Right, sure. Just wondering what he was doing that summer. From Sudsy Settlemyer said that he traveled around a lot that summer and went to different places.
Yeah, he had, typically what he'd do in the summer is he had a boat. He always had a boat.
Right.
And there was that interview that he did with, someone from Hockey Night in Canada.
Yeah.
Where he says, I don't think anyone will remember me 20 years from now. That boat, he'd take, he was a boat guy. So in the summertime, we'd get in boats and we'd just go through the archipelago of Stockholm.
Right.
Hundreds and hundreds of islands. And just, pull up to an island and, everybody, we'd have a boatload of people and we'd just spend the night.
Wow.
Spend the night, flotillas of boats and just, party and, hang out. But that's what he'd do in the summertime. He didn't work.
Right.
If that's what you know.
No, I'm sure. No, but
his life was just hockey and then, in the summertime it was, he wouldn't even really train. He wouldn't. There was no conditioning regimen.
He didn't work out.
No.
Wow.
I can remember he said training camp was coming. Well, it was probably in June or July, and he decided that he was going to go for a run through Stockholm, and I'm running with him through Stockholm.
Right.
And it's like he was I was in better shape than he was, and we're running through over bridges and through the town. And what possessed him to decide all of a sudden to go for a run? I don't know, but
he was huffing and puffing.
Yeah, of course he wasn't a runner. It's not something you just decide to run 10 miles. And that's what we did, I think, that day.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think I would be able to keep up with you guys.
I do remember. I was trying to think back of there was a time in probably '82. Remember Jim Craig?
Yes.
Goalie.
Yes.
I can remember being with Pelle because he was playing for the Erie Blades. Was it the Erie Blades? Remember them in the AHL? I think it was the Erie Blades.
Mm-hmm.
And we played them, and Jim Craig had been traded to Boston, and he was playing in Boston's system, and it was a farm team. And we went out after and spent the night. Pelle and I spent the night with Jim Craig, out for 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours. And it was, to think back now that 2 years after the Olympics, I'm sitting just having a conversation with Pelle Lindbergh and Jim Craig at the same table.
Wow.
It's just incredible to think now.
What a great feeling that must have been.
Yeah, and I remember the conversation was more like they were just talking about being goalies and playing the game and how they're playing at the moment and where they're going to end up, and it was pretty interesting to be sitting there and to be privy to it.
Yeah.
I've been very fortunate and the Flyers were very, very good to me to let me experience what I experienced with that team.
Kevin, how did you originally get involved in high school with the Flyers?
I had a buddy that was working for them. He was in my class. I was just starting high school, and they needed a truck unloaded. Sudsy did.
Right.
And he said, hey, we need help unloading this truck. You want to give us a hand? And so I went in, and I knew how to work. I worked on the fishing boats in the summertime, lobstering in Maine, and I know what it's like. You got to work. You got to work, and I did it. And Sudsy said, hey, go back tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
Back the next day, and the next day, and the thing is, with hockey, you don't apply for these jobs. I mean, if there's an opening on the training staff at the Flyers, you won't see it in the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Right.
They find who they want, and you have to be into the system, and you can go from team to team, but you don't just start.
Right.
You don't just apply for this job and say go for an interview.
You have to know somebody.
Yeah, you have to know somebody. And the nice thing about hockey, and I don't know about other sports, but the nice thing about hockey is once you're in, you're always in. And there's no doubt in my mind that if I needed a job in hockey right now, somewhere, I'm not saying that I'd go right to the NHL, but I could find a job in hockey because of my, it's a club.
Right.
And once you're in, you're in. So at least that's my perception. I may be rudely awakened, but that's just the way I look at it.
Kevin, and that's one thing that I worried about trying to start this was, would I be seen as an outsider trying to, be involved in hockey this way? That's one of the things I was concerned with.
Well, what you're going to find with hockey players is that it's not baseball, basketball, football. Hockey players are different. Hockey players are very down to earth. At least the people you're going to deal with now. I can't speak for today. These guys making 8, 10, 12 million. I think you've got a different mindset now in the way they treat others. When you got a kid that's 25 and he's making $8 million a year.
It's amazing.
Yeah, they're on a different plane than we can fathom. But the people you're gonna be dealing with, they're average Joes that just fortunate enough to play hockey and talented enough to play hockey.
Everybody who I've spoken to has been wonderful. I mean, they really have.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised at that.
I'm not
surprised at that.
I'm so happy for that too, because this is something that I've been doing this for a year and a half, the research. And I thought I got to go for it. It's.
So what's your goal?
My goal is just to have the book, the biography, from really the start of his life through the end of his life. Everything, how he, like you gave me a lot of information, how he grew up, and talking to some of the folks that you mentioned, that's going to be helpful. How tough it was to make it to the Flyers. His relationship with Chastain. I know they were about to get married, right?
Yeah.
The next year.
Yeah.
They were going to get married in '86. So that's the goal. And I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but to me, this story would make a good movie. You know, I mean, and that's a long shot type of thing.
Do you think you're going to get enough information to put a book together?
Well, that's what I'm hoping. You know, I don't know for certain. You know, and that's, you know, part of the deal, I guess, is that's why I'm making all these calls. I have a list of 400 and some odd people that I'm trying to contact. Now, I'm hoping that I could get at least 20% of those folks to be willing to talk to me. Yeah. Or direct me to somebody who would be willing to talk to me. And with all that, you know, I think we can. You know, that's my goal.
You know, here's the kind of guy Pelle was. The first time I went to Sweden, and I think I was maybe 19. Now, think about, I got on a plane, and I flew to JFK, and then I flew to Stockholm.
Right.
Via, I don't know, maybe Germany. And I get off the plane, and in Stockholm I clear customs, and I walk out, and here, you know, now I'm 19, and I'm, you know, in the middle of nowhere. I'm at Arlanda Airport, and a foreign country, foreign language, and I'm looking around, and I don't see Pelle. And he let me, and he and Bjorn, my buddy, were hiding, watching me, and they let me stew for a good 20 minutes, and I'm looking around, and I'm looking outside, because where am I going to go?
Right, yeah, you got to be a nervous wreck at that point.
There were no cell phones, you know?
Right.
I had no Swedish money. I didn't even know how to call them. You know? And then they came out and they thought it was really funny. But so what he did was he brought me over to his place. It's his mom's apartment with this room as you're talking about.
Right.
And I slept there because I've been up for so long, and I slept for about 3 hours, and then got up and we went immediately to the west coast of Sweden because Kerstin was in a windsurfing competition.
Right.
You know she was the women's world champion.
Yes.
Windsurfer.
Yeah.
So it was a 3 or 4 day thing in Halmstad on the west coast of Sweden. So he drove me the first day I got there. We went all the way to the west coast of Sweden in his Saab, and and just spent time. Now, this is typical, and I'll share this with you because it always sticks out in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
In Sweden, it's nothing for women to be topless at the beach.
Wow.
It's just that.
We're here, that would be a big thing.
Here it's a big deal. There, that's the culture. And so we go on this beach, and I mean the Swedish women are gorgeous.
Right.
And he's looking at me and he says, "Hey, did you bring your camera?" And I said, "Yeah, I have a camera." He says, "Well, go take their picture." I said, "No, I'm not going to take their picture. I'm 19 years old, and now I'm like, I got to get out of here." And so he says, "Give me a camera." And he goes over, and in Swedish he says to him, "Hey, my buddy here is from the United States. He's never seen topless people on the beach. Can he take your picture?" But that was him.
Did they recognize who he was?
I don't know. Probably not. Probably not. I mean, that didn't ring a bell that they knew him.
Right.
It wasn't like they said, "Hey, it's Pelle Lindbergh." But they were just, they were 18-year-old girls that they said, "Oh, we don't care," But that was the way he was. I mean, he was very straightforward, no fear, just I want to take their picture, so I'm going to go tell them I'm going to take their picture.
Right. He didn't wait for things to happen. He went and did what he had to do.
So, but that's the kind of guy he was. I mean, it was, "Hey, Kevin, you're here. I'm glad you're here. Let's go to the West Coast and find Kerstin and let's have some fun."
Right. Were you with the team when they went to the finals in '85?
Yeah, I was part of that team.
What was it like for him? He got to the finals. The Quebec series, he was absolutely unbelievable. Got him to the finals, and then he gets hurt. Did he talk to you about that? I mean, was he depressed at that point, or did he take it in stride?
No, it was more like, it was his knee.
Right.
And he just said, it was a slap shot, and, he just knew he had to ice it and take care of it and get going. And because I don't, recall it really affecting his play. I mean, he still played really, really well.
Right.
So I think he would have been upset if he was It was a good ride. I mean, it was a fun season, and it was a good team. It was a good group of guys. And
Right.
my feeling back then, or my recollection, is that he is more thinking along the lines that, you know, okay, no, let's just get ready for next season because we're gonna do it next season now.
Right.
I mean, everybody knew that Edmonton team was unbelievable.
Oh my God, yeah.
And to this day, I don't think any team would want to face those guys in their prime. And you know, we just knew. I mean, we'd go up to Edmonton and look at that lineup in Northlands Coliseum, and just, you know, I'd stand there in awe watching these guys skate around. I mean, Coffey, Curry, Gretzky. I mean, it was Grant Fuhr.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, you just think of the talent on that team. And
It's the greatest team ever assembled.
yeah, and I always thought, you know, if it wasn't for that team being assembled, you know, we'd all have Stanley Cup rings on.
Right.
And but you know, that's the way it is.
Well, let me ask you this: the next season, if you remember, Edmonton got shocked in the playoffs and they got knocked out the year that Pelle died. The Flyers also got shocked in the playoffs, like you said, against the New York Rangers. If Pelle hadn't passed away, did the Flyers win the '86 Stanley Cup? In your opinion?
Wow.
Because they wouldn't have had to face Edmonton; they would have faced Calgary.
Yeah, but we faced New York Rangers and lost.
Right, but would there have been a difference if Pelle was in net, or minus the emotional season that they had? There wouldn't have been the emotion.
Yeah, you know, boy, it's hard to say. I would think that, you know, with Pelle in goal, it was always a leg up because, you know, everybody knew he was going to make the big save. You know, when you look at Pelle Lindbergh, the way he played, he was not a technically sound goalie. He was always he'd make the big save because he'd be out of position and be athletic enough to dive and you know, make the big save or make the big glove save.
Right.
He was quick. He was just really quick, and he had the skills to be able to. And he was a good skater. He had the skills to really do what he needed to do on there. But you know, when you really look at a goalie, a technically sound goalie is really good when he's just standing in the right place and the puck hits him.
Right.
That's what, in theory,
Play the angles.
Play the angles. You know, Rick St. Croix was a good example of that type of goalie. He just played the angle. You know, he wasn't. You know, and that made him technically sound. You know, he knew where to be and where to stand, and then the puck would hit him.
Right.
But to answer your question, yeah, it's hard to you know, think back and say, well, if Pelle had been, it was essentially the same team.
Right.
I remember we picked up Chico Resch.
Exactly.
Chico Resch came that season, right?
In March.
Yeah. And boy, what, you know, he talk about down to earth. And if you get a chance to talk to him, he's the nicest guy in the world.
Really.
Absolutely, without a doubt. Just a real nice guy.
It must have been hard for him to come to a team that had gone through so much that season, and to be there at the end.
You know, he just came in. He's very unassuming, and you know, was a good addition. He was a nice guy. You know, you wonder why they brought him in at the time. Clearly for insurance purposes, but
were they losing confidence in Darren Jensen?
See, that's the thing. I mean, you don't bring a Chico Resch in because, you know, your goalies are outstanding. You bring Chico Resch in because there's, you know, if you're Bob Clark, you're thinking, I've got some concerns about the goaltending.
Right.
You know, and that, I don't know if you know, Sudsy mentioned it. I don't know if Bob Clark will participate in this forum and tell you what he was thinking back then. He might.
He thinks not.
Yeah, I don't know if he will or not.
He said he loved Pelle Lindbergh, though.
Yeah.
He said he gets very emotional when he talks about him, or...
Well, you know, and Bob Clark always has been very passionate about Barry Ashby.
Mm.
And, you know, but, you know, I'll tell you, Bob Clark, boy, you know, when I went to Philadelphia, Bob Clark, believe this or not, would get up in the morning and make us peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and bring them to us, because he's always the first guy at the rink.
Right.
And I used to think to myself, what is Bob Clark doing, getting up in the morning and worrying about what I need to eat? You know what I mean?
Right.
He'd stop at McDonald's or Burger King and get us breakfast, and just so because he'd come in and just sit and talk with us, waiting for practice. And this is at 8 in the morning. Practice is at 10.
Now, is this when he's a player or when he's...
Yeah, it's his last season as a player.
Wow.
In 84.
Right.
It was just incredible. Incredible. And, he doesn't have to do that.
No.
And I thought to myself, this is Bob Clark, he's an icon. And he was an icon to me, too, because, it wasn't that far from those Stanley Cups. And, I'm thinking, what are you doing? But he did it all the time.
Wow.
No one-shot deal. All the time.
And Pelle looked up to Bob Clark.
Oh, yeah.
How close were they?
I think they were pretty close. There was not a big, but there was an age difference.
Sure.
And Bob Clark didn't go out and hang out as much. I mean, he would, but he not as much as he different interests really.
Right. He's in his mid-30s at that point, right?
Yeah, and on the road, I mean, it would, everybody would get together and have a few beers and have fun and talk and it was interesting group of people.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Real interesting group of people.
Do you think there's a possibility that Bob Clark would speak with me?
He, you know what? If you don't ask, you're not going to know.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
And you need to...
Because I think what Suddy was concerned about, he said, Bob Clark is very tight-lipped. He said anything that's within the Flyers family stays in the family. But, Kevin, I'm not trying to stir the pot or do an expose on, investigating what happened with the... I want to know what Pelle Lindbergh was as a person. And that's what I want to get across. I'm not interested in trying to open up a can of worms.
Yeah.
If I was, then, I know that no one would talk about it anyway.
Yeah.
Pelle Lindbergh was an idol for me. I grew up... I went to a preseason game the year he passed away. Just before he died, I guess it was about a month or two. And they had an autograph session. And my dad was there, my little brother was there, and they were getting autographs. And my dad said, why don't you go into the Pelle Lindbergh line? We'll go here. And I was 10. So I'm standing there by myself. And unfortunately, the line ended. The signing session was over. And we didn't get his autograph. And I'll never forget this. My father said to me, we'll just get it next time. Don't worry about it. Because I was so disappointed. And that stuck with me. I'm 30 years old, and that's 20 years ago. That I didn't get that. Yeah, I never got it. And, it bothers me. I didn't know him. He wasn't a family member. He wasn't a friend. But I was a 10-year-old boy, and I looked up to him. And it just, I don't know. I felt like I wanted to give something back.
Well, this could be a great way to do it.
It's every November 10th, I have the videos of his accident. I'll just look back and play it for a few minutes and take a look. And I can remember where I was. I can remember what I was thinking. I never heard of the term brain dead at that point when I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
It was an introduction to what real life is all about.
And I got that education at 21, 22.
Oh, that's got to be devastating. I mean, that's a young age too. 21.
Yeah. And I've maintained my friendships. I mean, I've talked to a few guys since, but for the most part, when those teams break up, everybody goes in different directions, and you very rarely hear from anybody. Not because you weren't friends, but people just move on. But I've maintained my connections with friends from Sweden that were Pelle's friends.
That's great.
And I learned, and I met them through Pelle. And I've had, I've been over there. My friends come over here, and they're all Pelle's buddies.
How did they get over it? I mean, did they just, do they think about him, talk about him every once in a while, or do people just not?
When we're together, we'll toast to Pelle, and we even they started calling him, Gump.
Gumper.
That's what we'd call him, but. It's just, I was trying to think up some things for you because it's been so long, but, many things are vivid but I just remember him as he was my buddy.
Yeah.
He was my best friend at the time, and he was someone that I was comfortable with and could just call up and talk to, or go over to his house and hang out, and then or go and do something.
Did you ever ride in the car with him?
Oh yeah.
Did he scare you? I mean, with the
No.
No?
No. I don't remember that. I mean, he took that car on a car ferry one time over to this island called Gotland, and this was he was playing on what was called the Superstar Swedish team, and it was soccer, but they called it football, Superstar football team.
So he was a soccer player as well.
Yeah, he played soccer.
Wow.
And it was this group that we were hanging out with was brought over there to play in front of about 5,000 people in this town called Visby, and it's an old medieval town surrounded by a big wall, and it's just amazing. And
right.
It's on the Baltic, in the archipelago, and the people that were there were like Ulf Bengtsson, who was Mr. World at the time, bodybuilder. There's this power lifter called Hoa Hoa. There were boxers and comedians, and the team was made up of all these famous Swedish people.
Right.
And I remember that Pelle wanted me to play. He says, "Well, you're from the States. We want you to play." And I'm like, I've never played soccer in my life. I'm not going to go out and play in front of 5,000 people. But that was Pelle. He's like, "Well, what do you mean? You can play?"
He had no fear of anything.
Yeah, he says, "It's not that hard." He says, "Why aren't you going to play?" He says, and then he says, he'll say something like, "I hate you." That was his line. "I hate you. I hate you." And but I didn't play. But I mean, would have turned into a comedy event. But that was Pelle.
Right.
And that's the way his summer was. I mean, and then of course, after the match they had, we all went out and had a few pops, and it was just fun. I mean, the thing is now you think about when you're 30 and 40 and all the stresses and responsibility that you have, making a mortgage,
right.
jobs and kids and all that stuff, and I think back then that my only concern was what are we going to do for fun?
Right.
And Pelle was the best person to be with when we were deciding what to do to have fun, because and the thing about Pelle is no matter where he went, he was a magnet for people. Just people would not even knowing who he was, and this was very, very common. If we were on the road and if we went out to a club, Pelle's big thing was he would say, "What are we tonight?" Because he wouldn't tell people he was the goalie for the Flyers.
Right.
He'd tell people he was a helicopter pilot. I'm serious, and he'd go, and we would have to sit there and pretend we were helicopter pilots on, staying at the hotel, and he just thought that was the funniest thing. That we're in the Swedish Air Force, he'd make stuff up, and that would be the big thing. What are we tonight? That. But
that's really neat.
That was Pelle Lindbergh. He would be, his thing wasn't to tell people, "Hey, I'm the best goalie in the world." He'd make something up.
He didn't realize that, huh? He didn't realize he was the best in the world. I mean, logically he knew that, but it wasn't. It just was to him. Is that right?
What's that?
To him, that's just the way it was.
Yeah. I mean, he was.
He was matter of fact about, "I'm the best goalie in the world, but we have to win a Stanley Cup."
Well, I think that if you asked him who's the best goalie in the world, he would tell you, Grant Fuhrer or Vladislav Tretiak.
Really? Yeah, the Russian.
Oh yeah. He looked up to Tretiak, and had a good rapport with Vladimir Tretiak.
Oh, they had met.
Oh yeah. They knew each other.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because they played in international competition.
Well, okay.
his Vestia cups and things like that. So I mean, his funeral was amazing. I mean, it was just overflowing, and you just looked around and you saw all these people you only saw on TV, like from Russia, and it was pretty amazing. And I was fortunate to have I was a front row seat with Bob Clark, Bernie Perrant, Jay Snyder,
Right.
Allen.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing.
That had to be surreal as well.
Pretty amazing. I've got a magazine. It's a Swedish magazine about Pelle Lindbergh. Actually, I got it in front of me. It's called Power Play.
Right.
And it talks about this thing on here, Sundin Forsberg and Micke Remberg, and it's from 1995, and it has a thing on Pelle.
10 years later at that time.
10 years later, and I'm in it, and it's me standing in front of Pelle's casket. It's a whole thing on Pelle, is what it is. But it's in Swedish.
Wow.
So yeah, and it's quite a few pages long. But on page 61, it's me, Bob Clark, Bernie Perrant, Jay Snyder, and Keith Allen in front of his casket.
And from what I've read, it was an amazing funeral. They had the music was done by Vicky.
Yeah.
She's the pop star. I can't remember her last. It started with a B.
I forget it too.
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah.
She was a pop star.
Yeah.
And she sang some Elton John songs.
Yeah. He was big into Elton John. He's the Rolling Stones, Elton John, Alice Cooper. I mean, he's this rock and roll kid,
Was he?
Yeah.
Did he ever talk about the wanting to be in movies after? I know you said the movie was terrible,
No.
but no, that was his last. He wasn't going to do that again.
No, I can't remember him ever having any aspirations to be doing anything else or have anything planned for the future.
What do you think he'd be doing today?
I think he'd be a goalie coach, maybe a scout. He'd be in hockey.
Probably have a couple kids.
Probably, yeah.
Did he from what I've heard, he loved kids.
Yeah, he was good. He had nieces and nephews, and he made sure that I met them, and I'd go and have dinner with his nieces and nephews, and who knows? He lived his life like he was going to be around till he was 26.
Really?
Yeah.
So he got everything out of his life.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that really know him well that say the same thing.
Really?
Yeah. It's just some people know. Maybe not at the time, but
Somehow.
yeah.
There's some way that he knew that. Did he ever? Do you think that '83 season where he struggled a lot? Do you think that had something to do with that All-Star game where Gretzky scored the 4 goals on him? And
I don't know. I mean,
he never seemed to come back that year.
no, he didn't. He went down to Springfield,
Right.
Chicago and Philly's team, and I remember when you talk about who he idolized, he loved Billy Smith,
Did he really?
and he called himself Pelle Smith sometimes. What we did was we took a Cooper helmet like Billy Smith had,
Yeah.
cage. You know how the cage sat out,
Yeah.
and he put some stickers on it, and he'd go out and practice and pretend to be Billy Smith, and he says, "I'm going to be Pelle Smith today." And he actually, if you find footage, there's footage of him playing for the Springfield Indians with that helmet and cage on.
I do have it.
That's his Pelle Smith. He's pretending to be Pelle Smith while he's playing in that game.
I thought it was because that league might not have allowed the.
No, that was the AHL.
Really?
Yeah.
And-
He was trying to be Pelle Smith. So he's trying to take a situation that's very difficult
Yes.
and have fun with it.
Right.
And come back, and that was his way of dealing with it. But he told me, I helped him make that, and he says, I'm going to go down there and pretend I'm Pelle Smith, and he went, and that's what he did.
Wow.
Billy Smith would probably love to hear that story right now.
Yeah, really.
But that's exactly what he was doing with that helmet. He made it to be like Billy Smith.
Kevin, that's another thing that you mentioned about Billy Smith. I'm writing letters eventually to other teams, like the Rangers, players that played And especially the series in '85 against Quebec and those players. I just want to see what they have to say about them, because I'm sure there was a lot of mutual respect.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Especially Swedish players.
Yeah. All the Swedish players, especially back then, had been on the national team and played Swedish elite.
Thomas Janssen.
Yeah.
Guys like that.
Those guys are all best buds from way, way, way back. Bo Berglund was good friends with him.
Really?
I remember Bo was on the team.
Yeah, not for long though, right?
No, well, he finished that '86 season up. He was a good guy. He was a pretty funny guy. I'm thinking about Thomas Eriksson. See, the problem with Thomas, he's very shy and reserved, and it's going to be hard to pull a whole lot out of Thomas, I think.
Right.
It's just my feeling. It's worth a try.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that people can't. They're not. They might not feel able to do that. But what I'm hoping is that they care enough for Pelle that they'll want to do it for Pelle's sake, not for my sake.
Yeah.
I don't. It's not about me. It's about Pelle Lindbergh. That's the. One of the main reasons why I wanted to do this was I've read a lot of the Flyers. So I've been a Flyers fan since I grew up. I grew up in South Philadelphia, and I would read the books, and there would be like 2 or 3 pages about Pelle Lindbergh, and I said, my God, I want to read more. There was more. There had to be more than this.
Yeah.
And there should be something devoted to him and just to him. His story, his life was a storybook.
Yeah, he touched so many people, and that's the legacy of Pelle Lindbergh. Not so much that he, won a Vezina Trophy and went to the Stanley Cup Final.
Right.
Pelle Lindbergh was able to touch so many people and bring so many people together that to me that's his legacy. See, I don't think back at Pelle Lindbergh, and I think maybe you can gather this from this conversation. Pelle Lindbergh to me was just another player to me.
Right.
He had his good games, he had his bad games. He was but he was of anybody in my 9 years in pro hockey, he was the only player that I really got to know and hung out with on a consistent basis.
Why was he so close with the trainers? He obviously was great friends with you and Sudsy Settlemeyer.
And Kurt.
And Kurt Munn.
He was with Kurt. I don't know. That's just the way he was.
Was he like that with the other players?
No.
So it was mostly the trainers.
Yeah. I mean, he'd go out and hang out with the players. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But he was more. And I remember reading Al Morgani. I think someone back then wrote an article, and maybe you can find it. But he wrote that it was interesting to note that Pelle's best friends on the team were the trainers. And I thought at the time, you know what? It's the first time I realized that it's an absolutely true statement.
Wow.
That was the case. And I think if you asked others, or as you go through this process, you ask others who are his best friends on the team.
Darren Jensen said trainers.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the way he wanted to be in our equipment room. Like making this helmet, or
right.
He'd just be scheming up something, to do. Like we'd take his mask and would put mustaches on it, and he'd be practicing just because.
Right.
But yeah, I mean that. I don't know why. I don't know why.
He'd like to be silly.
I think that he wanted to stay just the average Joe.
Right.
And he knew that's what we were. He wasn't. Although he had the flashy car and the Rolex presidential watch, and there were some things that he wanted to be materialistic about. But I think that was the kid in him saying, hey, I can afford this, so I want to
I want to enjoy my money.
You know, this was Pelle. He's like, you know, when are you going to buy a Rolex watch? Because I have one, and I want you to have one too. So why don't you buy one? You know, I mean, who comes up with that stuff?
Yeah.
You know? But that's what.
Such a unique individual.
Yeah. You know, I truly believe that you know, there's a reason why, you know, I had an interaction with him in my life, and he's made me a better person today.
Right.
And you know, he's.
You know, I also want to speak with, and I'm hoping they'd be willing to do this. There was John Keeler was the person who received Pelle's heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know he passed away, but I wanted to talk to his family and just see, you know, Pelle gave until there was absolutely nothing left to give. He gave that man 5 more years of life.
Yeah. Someone, his corneas were donated also.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, that's you know, it just seems like that's apropos that his life would end with him giving something, and nothing more precious than that. You know, here's a guy that was about to die, you know, and Pelle dies, and it's a tragedy, but if anything could be a positive out of that, he saved somebody else's life.
Yeah. That was nice of the family to offer that.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you he didn't plan it. You know, he wasn't thinking about that.
Oh no, I know, but you know, but that's just, you know, it seems I didn't know him, but now I'm getting to know him. You know, and that's just the kind of person he seemed to be.
Yeah.
You know, he's absolutely amazing. You know, it's amazing that you know, your insight to why he was such friends with the trainers. That seems to be the reason he wanted to be down to earth.
Yeah, and I mean his dad was close to him, and his dad was, you know, always helped out with his teams. They didn't have trainers like we have over here with the teams, and I know his dad was involved, sort of as a quasi-trainer with some of the teams he was with, and you know, I think that there was always that connection to his dad. You know, you talk about the homesickness, and, and he would look at us and sort of see maybe a little bit, you know, this is what his dad loved to do and help out doing, and maybe that had something to do with it.
He looked up to you guys.
Yeah, and you know, well, it's hard to say why. You know, he just gravitated towards the trainers and would hang out with us, and but I mean, he was the kind of person that's like, you know, if the season's over, you know, when are you coming over? You know, I'm going home on, you know, on June 12th. When are you coming over? And you know, and I'd fly in, and he'd pick me up, and you know, I'd be there for, you know, think about 6 weeks.
Wow, that's
over there and just you know, just hanging out in Stockholm, going out all over the country. I saw the whole country. I saw Finland. I saw Norway. I was in Denmark. I mean, what a way to live.
Yeah, really it is. How do you get along with the coaches? With Pat Quinn, Bob McCammon, and then finally Mike Keenan. Keenan loved him, from what I heard.
Keenan liked him. As a matter of fact, Keenan would go over and shake his hand. Before Pelle took his gear off, Keenan had to go over and shake his hand, and if he didn't, a few times Keenan forgot, and Pelle would just sit there with all his gear on, and Keenan would come over. But you know, the relationship with the coaches kept their distance for good reason, and with all the players. And I'm not saying they didn't get along. I think they got along. Everybody got along, but Pelle was the kind of guy that he spoke his mind, and when he felt he should be playing and he wasn't playing, he told the coaches, you know, this is what I think, and you know, he was very opinionated when it came to speaking his mind, and you know, sometimes that ruffled feathers a little bit, but
well, from what you know, obviously the press has said that Keenan was tough to play for. He was very hard on the players.
Yeah.
Was he like that with Pelle? Or was Pelle? What's that?
With everybody.
Really?
Yeah, except the trainers.
Really?
Yeah, he liked the trainers.
You guys had a lot of.
and still is, I'm sure, down in Florida. Keenan's thing was he was a taskmaster.
Yeah.
And he did not let the players get close to him. And Keenan hung out with us. You know, if there was a group that he hung out with the other coaches, it was E.J. McGuire, Ted Sater, and us. You know, we'd hang out on the road more often, but my recollection, you know, and I was around a lot of coaches back then, that, you know, he had a game to play himself, and it was to you know, make sure the players performed, and it was his job to make sure they performed, and whether that meant he played mind games with them or not, you know, he knew how to do that, and he did it well.
Right. So Pelle wasn't hands off. I mean, he hammered him as much as he would hammer anybody else.
Pelle didn't hang out with him.
Right.
If that's what you mean.
Well, I know a lot of players he would. What Darren Jensen said was that he would tear you down.
Yeah.
He had a way of like.
Taskmaster.
Yeah. But Pelle wasn't an untouchable then.
No. Not with Mike Keenan. No.
Nobody was untouchable.
No. I mean, he'd scream at us. You know, the team would be losing. He'd come in and yell at us. and then after come in and say, "I was just trying to get the guys going." And we're, you know, we're just standing there like, bah.
Wow.
Quivering like jelly. But you know, that was Mike Keenan.
Did he have a lot of idiosyncrasies, a lot of superstitions?
Yeah, you know, just every goalie has a way of doing, you know, the way they get dressed, the way that, you know, if in between periods they want, you know, he wanted, you know, a Gatorade in the water, and the Gatorade had to be in the right hand and the water had to be in the left hand, and you know, but that's not uncommon. That most goalies are like that.
Right.
You know, they want you to be, even like for me, you know, if you're at home when they're going out, a certain trainer has to be, you know, at one spot of the door and he taps, and the other trainer has to be on the other side, and if we're not there, I mean, like Pelle would just stop and look around and say, where is he? You know, I mean but that's common of it probably still is now, but back then it was, you know, that's very common.
Big thing for goaltenders.
Yeah, you know, and the thing with goalies, and Pelle was the same. If when they come in for a game, if they're playing, you don't even talk to them. You know, you may say, you know, well, what do you need? You need a strap. You need, you know, hang on, I'll get it for you. But no joking around. You know, that they're left alone, and they go into their zone and they do their thing, and
not the same with other players.
Not the same with other players. It's just another day at the office, but
right.
You know, but just prior to game time, it's, you know, it's different. But for goalies, you know, it's and my I was partial to goalies. I like working with the goalies, and you know, I found it just fascinating to watch them, and you know, watch them perform on the ice and do their thing, and to have a part in, you know, helping them prepare was I liked it. You know, it was kind of fun.
That's great.
Yeah, it was kind of fun.
How was he with Bernie Perrant once? I mean, were they extremely close when he was with the team?
Yeah, they were pretty close. I mean, do you know Bernie?
I don't.
I mean, Bernie Perrant is this is Bernie. Bernie, when he was the goalie coach, would stand out on the ice with goalie skates, dress pants, a white silk Flyers jacket, and he had his 2 Stanley Cups on, and he'd be out there standing around, and when he'd see me, he'd like cheer, and he'd have his 2 Stanley Cups, and he'd show me his Stanley Cups. I mean, he's just a funny guy. You know, he's just a guy that down to earth, you know, typical goalie. But yeah, to answer your question, but probably Bernie more than anybody else in the Flyers hierarchy and organization, Pelle was you know, looked up to the most.
Sure.
I don't remember ever hanging out with Bernie and Pelle at the same time, though.
Really?
I wasn't Philly.
Because in that interview on the boat, I do remember him saying that Bernie was a good friend, that they'd gone out to dinners and stuff like that.
I'm sure they did, but I was never there. I don't remember going to dinner with Pelle and Bernie.
Right.
At any point.
Do you think it was Bernie who turned him into the goaltender he was, or you think he was there and it was just a little extra push? How much influence do you think Bernie had on?
Well, I think that Bernie's influence was the way he played, how he played, and what he accomplished when he played. More so than Bernie teaching him how to play, or how to, I think maybe Bernie gave him a few tips here and there, but it was Pelle's aspiration to play like Bernie Perrant, and watching him growing up and striving to be what Bernie was and did.
Right.
And so in a sense, so to answer your question, yes, but not so much on a one-on-one basis.
Did Pelle ever mention how special it must have been to receive the Vezina Trophy from Bernie Perrant? That was an amazing thing.
Yeah, no, I never talked to him about that. I could tell. I saw it on TV, and I knew he was probably the proudest moment of his life, is standing up there, getting
From his idol.
The Vezina Trophy. Yeah.
And how about the next year? Did you feel a little disappointed that Bob Froese wasn't awarded the Vezina Trophy?
Back then, only one goalie got it.
Right, but he led the league in every goaltending category. John Van Beesbrook tied him for victories, and they gave it to Van Beesbrook. And I think that, at least from what I remember, the thinking was that anybody could goalie for the Flyers because they had such a great team.
Yeah.
So they gave it to Van Beesbrook. Do you think that was Bob Froese might have gotten slighted on that?
You know what? I don't remember that being an issue.
Really?
No, I don't.
Amazingly, Bob Froese was the runner-up. So Pelle won in '85, Froese runner-up in '86, and Hextall wins in '87.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just amazing. I mean, that you would have three Vezina Trophy type goaltenders.
Yeah.
If Pelle, how long do you think he would have played had he lived?
I've thought about that, and I'm not sure, but hard to say.
Would he have been like maybe a Brodeur, like that kind of career?
Well, the problem was his conditioning. He would have had to have changed his conditioning regime in order to maintain. Like Glenn Hackborn, he just stayed in great shape, and he played 19 years pro. It wasn't all in the NHL, but it was in Europe and different places.
Right.
But he did that because he stayed in shape. Now, Pelle, in order to do that, would have had to have changed his regimen. In other words, he would have had to have worked out. He hated practice. Just didn't want to play the games.
Really?
Yeah. No, did not want to practice.
So
did not want to work out.
If he didn't work out, he might not have had a Hall of Fame career. If he worked out, it's possible that he would have had a Hall of Fame type career.
Well, it's hard to say. I think he would have, his natural ability would have carried him for many more years. And would that have been enough? Could very well have been enough to put him in the Hall of Fame had he won a cup or two.
Right.
And he would have been there. But his stuff is when he died, I sent goalie pads, mask, and gloves and blocker, I think, to the Hall of Fame, and I think it's still there.
I've seen it
on display.
The mask is.
Yeah, I sent that stuff up.
Did you really?
Yeah.
That's neat. It says on the plaque 1985 Pelle Lindbergh mask.
Yeah.
That's pretty neat.
And that wasn't his game mask. If you notice that wasn't the mask he was wearing at the time. That was his mask he wore in Maine and in Sweden.
Oh.
So it was his Shesterton, I think. I don't know where that mask is that he was wearing at the time.
Right.
But the family said send this mask, so I did.
Wow, that was nice.
Yeah.
That's great.